everybody, and welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network. My name is Jeff Bradbury. Thank you so much for joining us today and making TeacherCast your home for professional development. This is the Jeff Bradbury Show, a podcast about amazing people doing amazing things to change the world. Today, I have a fantastic episode with an amazing guest talking all about resilience. And I have so much respect for all of the stuff that my guest today has done. We're going to be diving into it and hopefully helping you guys with a little bit of some of the things that you need to be resilient. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how we can help our students with their resilience as well. Hope you guys have had a chance to check out some of the great episodes over on the Jeff Bradbury Show. You can find out more information over at teachercast.net/podcast, where you can find not only our Jeff Bradbury episodes, but also Digital Learning Today, our show for educational technology enthusiasts, and also over 280 episodes of Ask the Tech Coach. If you're an instructional coach or a digital learning leader, check out all the great stuff happening over at TeacherCast today. My guest today is a two-time best-selling author, a podcast host, a speaker, an Emmy award-winning television news anchor, and a former member of the USA gymnastics team. She is such an inspiration. I want to bring on today Miss Nina Sossaman-Pogue. Nina, how are you today? Welcome to TeacherCast.
I am doing great, Jeff. Thanks so much for having me.
I am so honored to have you on the show today. You have such an amazing story to tell, and I'm so thrilled that we're able to share this with our teachers and with our students and educational leaders today. You know, author, host, speaker, Emmy Award winner, you've done it all. But for those who are not familiar with a little bit of your background, give us an overall of what's your journey been like?
Well, you mentioned all of the things that would be on my resume if you went to LinkedIn or you Googled me, like all the good stuff, which is fantastic. And I'm obviously proud of those. But my journey and what I talk about is resilience, because along with all of those, I had a lot of big failures and struggles. And so what I like to talk about and share with people is how I got through those, the insights and research I've done to show them how they can get through whatever's happening with them. So yes, I was a member of the U.S. gymnastics team, but then I didn't make the Olympics. And at 16, thought I was a failure, having spent my whole life with that. And then, yes, I went to a D1 school, went to LSU and competed for them in gymnastics. But then I blew out my knee and lost my sport. Another big, now I don't know what to do with myself. Now what moment? And then I found television. I loved being a journalist. I was very, award-winning journalist, and then I became a popular news anchor, all the big good stuff. But then during that time, too, I also went through a divorce, and I got fired one time from a TV station. I won Charleston's favorite news anchor for the 7th year in a row on a Thursday, got fired on a Friday, just let go in budget cuts. So then I had a little traumatic accident happen at one point in my life, too, where I was in a really dark place and kind of didn't know if I could go forward. And then I found my way past that, and I got into tech, and I had huge success in tech, out of television into a tech company. And we took the company public, and it was a big success. So my story, you're kind of getting it, is all these ups and downs. It's not just the high stuff. And what I love to talk about is how all of us, nobody gets past. You look at anybody, they're going through stuff. And let's figure out how to help each other all get through all the tough times in our lives.
When we're looking at these tough times, what advice do you have for somebody who is in that, gully of things right now? I'll start by saying, we were at the ESD conference a few days ago out in Denver, and so many educators came up and said, hey, my career's going well. And so many educators, unfortunately, came and said, hey, budget cuts, and I'm now looking for things. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have out there for anybody who's sitting there on this roller coaster known as life? How do you get through it?
Well, there's 4 points I have this framework, and there's 4 points to it. But the first thing I would say is, draw a line on a piece of paper from 0 to 100, and then put 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, make your timeline of your life across it, and then put however old you are right now on that dot on that line. Because what you're going through is a tough time. It's a tough chapter, but it's not your whole life. And so to put it in perspective, to be able to look at, hey, this thing that seems like it's everything, taking up all the space in your head, shrink it down to where it fits into the big, long, giant, messy, marvelous life that you have, and put that dot on that timeline. And then draw a line in front of it and in back of it. And you're not allowed to go to the woulda, shoulda, couldas, wish I'd have chosen another career. Why did I get into education? Or why did I marry the guy? Or whatever it is in the backside. And you're not allowed to go to the front, to all the what ifs. And just like, what are you actually dealing with right now? Because any good therapist will tell you, Jeffrey, that if you're in the Worried about the past? If you're thinking about the past, that's where depression lives. And if you're all worried and thinking in the future, that's where anxiety lives. So we had this magical little moment, in the middle. I'm not a therapist, but that's just the way it is. And it's even ancient Chinese philosophers always said, the past is where depression lives and the future is where anxiety lives, and there's peace in the presence. So that line, draw lines on each side of it I call it isolate it in that middle. And then I always say, then draw a circle around that line and go, who are the people in this with me? Because when we're going through stuff, we feel really alone. We feel like that we're in it and nobody's been through it like we have, but somebody's been through something similar, or someone can help you with something, or they see it differently than you do. So I draw a circle around it and say, who do you need to pull into that circle with you? And then look at the people around you right now, who's helping and who's hurting, and then edit your people. Some of those people need to be out of that circle if they're going to live in the drama and the worry and all of that. You need to surround yourself with some people who can help you move forward. And then the last part is the story. Watch that language in your head. If you're sitting there going, this is horrible, this is never going to work, this is ruined, I've wasted my life, that language is all that self-sabotaging language that we're doing. Those words in our head come out of our mouth and they become our story. So the self-sabotaging language and overgeneralizing, this always happens to me, or, going back and exaggerating or belaboring, going, if so-and-so had done their part, or if something else had happened, or, Carl back there is still there and he didn't do half the work I did. You got to get that language out of your head and find some positive language and go, this is a challenge. I need to pull in some people to help me with this, and let's figure out what the future looks like. Because I will tell you, and so many people who have had tumultuous lives and found big success, that often the magic is in those moments where you get a free slate to do whatever you want with all that blank space ahead on your timeline.
I think that's some of the best advice that we've ever had here on the show. And being in a position right now, especially in education, where so many people are having those ups and downs, I often have to remind myself, think about who is in front of you, exactly like you just said. I mean, even just listening to you say that, thinking about my wife, thinking about the triplets, thinking about all the good stuff that's happening right now for me. When did this concept hit you? Was it back in gymnastics? Was it back when you were at an anchor? When did this concept of living in the moment really sink in for you?
I wasn't certain that what exactly it was that was sinking in or what was happening to me over time. But when I turned 50, my father had passed from Alzheimer's. I'd been his caregiver, and I'd been through all these ups and downs, and I'd gotten through them. And I'd become this person that people came to when they got into a tough spot. They didn't report to me. At one point, I had 200 and so people that reported up to me, and I'd get a sync on my calendar, and it'd be somebody I didn't even know sitting across me in this little cube in this corporate office. And they would say, I hear you're good at getting people through tough times. And I would first go, holy crap, I'm not in HR. Like, should I be having this conversation? But then I knew I was helping, and I knew that I was the go-to person in my neighborhood. And when a guy would show up at my door, and a neighbor would knock on my door, and I'd open it, and I remember one guy was standing there with 2 beers in his hands, and he's like, I just lost my job and I can't go home and I don't want to know what to do. Will you help? I just kind of became this person, and I was like, come on in. We walked through the house, we sat on the end of a dock, and we figured it all out, and he was fine. I knew I was saying the right things or sharing things that had helped me, books I've read, the way I think. It's some neuroscience and some stoicism and psychology and cognitive behavior therapy. It's my mashup of all of that. So when my dad passed, and I had this moment with Alzheimer's and thought, holy moly, I could be next because I'm in my 50s. I wanted to put it all down in writing and figure out exactly what I was helping in case I wasn't there for my own grown children. And that became the impetus for it. And the more I got into the research and the looking at it and writing a book, then it became, I got to that word resilience. And then it really was when I leaned all in and went, wow, I really do have something here. The way in which I think and go through life is very valuable. If I could just, bottle it up and download it. And I call it brainware. If I could just get this brainware in everybody's head, it would be helpful for them when they were in a really tough time, and felt they couldn't go on.
Speaking of tough times, there's obviously points in everybody's life where you realize the tough time hits. You get fired, you get let go, there's a breakup in the relationship, something like that. But for many of us, you don't realize that you're in that situation until you stop, turn around and go, what is actually happening? And you do that assessment. Either way, it's all about figuring out how to get back on your feet. When that person does knock on your door and says, I need help, I need to talk to somebody, what do you say to them to help them on that journey to get them back going in the right direction?
Yeah, I call it those now what moments. And the first thing, because there's like, now what? Wait, this is actually happening to me. Now what? This happens to other people. But now it's my world. Now what? The first thing I always say is, oh, I listen, because whatever you're going through is your thing. I haven't been through it. I call it your this. This thing that you're dealing with is yours. So I listen to what is this that they're dealing with. The name of my first book is This Is Not the End. Strategies to get you through the worst chapters of your life. So you're this. So I will listen intently and listen to what their this is and try to get a handle on really if it's just getting fired, you still are the same person you were yesterday. You still have the skills. Let's figure out, how to move forward. But the main thing is to listen. But what I tell them first is it's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay this way. So you may not be maybe not okay for a little while, maybe a few days, a few weeks, might be a year of this search, but it's not your whole story. You're not okay, and sit in it. You're allowed to be sad and mad and ticked at the world or whatever it is. That's own that. But while it's okay to not be okay, it's not okay to stay that way. So let's start thinking, what does it look like in the future? Because 5 years from now, it's not going to feel like it does right now. So I try to get them to that place first. A great story I can share. My son, when he was in college, my kids are all out of college and adulting, pseudo-adulting, but one time one of his friends came home with him from college, and this cute sandy-haired boy sitting on the end of my dock. I solve a lot of problems on the end of my dock. This cute sandy-haired boy sitting there, and he had this big scar on his face, and he looked like pretty beat up. And he shared with me, well, Miss Nina, I got really drunk and made a fool of myself at a party. And he didn't say fool of himself. He used other language. But he said I fell down and smashed my face. I ended up in the emergency room, and his teeth were wired shut a little bit. And he had this big gash on his lip, and he just looked like crap. Poor thing. And he said, I'm been too embarrassed to go back to class because everybody's going to, talk about me. And I'm too ashamed to call my parents. I've just ruined my life. My life is ruined. I ruined my life in one night. And I looked at this sweet boy, and I wanted to go, no, you didn't, baby. You just really made a big mistake. But I didn't. I said, hey, just work with me here a sec. Didn't you say you wanted to get a dog? And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, yeah, what kind of dog would you get when you grow up? And he said, I think I'd get a lab. I've always wanted a black lab. And I said, well, what would you name that dog? And he said, like a people name, like Eric. And I was like, okay, well, when you and Eric are walking down the beach 5 years from now, we live in Charleston. So when you and Eric are walking down the beach 5 years from now, this is not going to feel like this. This is going to be a story you tell, and it will feel very different, and your parents will still love you, and you'll still have friends. You will be fine. 5 years from now, when you and Eric are on the beach, this won't feel like this. So sometimes the best things we can do for ourselves is just remind ourselves that emotions change, our brains get past the shock and the anger and all the stuff, and the grief that we go through when something happens. But 5 years from now, it's not going to feel like this. And all we can do today is do one thing that us 5 years from now would be happy we did. Just do one thing to make, like I always say, Nina 5 years from now is going to be so thrilled that I'm on Jeff's podcast and I shared this with somebody, and whatever. So do one thing today that the you 5 years from now is going to be happy that you did.
Talking today to Nina Sossaman-Pogue about resilience and how do you stay focused. And Nina, listening to your story, very motivating for me. I've often found that there's two different kinds of people, ones that they know that they're going through it and ones that don't really know what they've been through. And just to kind of give you a little bit of a background, I found myself a couple of weeks ago, I was actually a guest on somebody's show and they're asking me all of these questions. And I realized, well, in the last 13 years, I've been through triplets. I've been supporting a spouse through cancer. I've been through all these things that happen with kids, job loss, TeacherCast success, all of that stuff. It's been a ride for everything. One of the things I know that you always talk about is this ability to, again, that whole stay in the moment thing, which is something for me, I kind of have to do because if I think outside, And the fact that, I give my kid medicine twice a day, and I've got a student that's, he's got the 504s and the IEPs, and I've got something else going on. There's so much stuff around you. It is that constant focus. I'm curious of where that came from with you. Was that gymnastics of time after time, 6 to 8 hours a day of just dedicating yourself to the sport? Was that being in a corporate position, knowing that you had to move this company forward? And like you said, you had 200 people under you. Where did you build that drive from inside?
First, good luck to you. You've got a lot going on, and I will be sending you a copy of my book because you are in a tough chapter of your life, but an exciting one as well. So first, I need to say, wow, you are in the middle of it, and it is a journey. Mine, I think that this resilience piece that I didn't even know that was the word until I got to where I was studying it. I think mine started when I was a young athlete. So the definition of resilience, it's very different than persistence. Persistence is you double down, go hard, you don't give up. That's persistence. Resilience is your ability to learn and grow and adapt in a positive way to whatever happens in your life. So it's the adapt piece. Think about like January 1st, 2020. Take us all back to that date. All of us woke up with things we wanted to do, places we wanted to see. That was a year I was going to lose weight. I was going to take a trip. I was going to fix this relationship. Like we all had it. We had targets. And then the world changed and we had to adapt. You couldn't just double down and go hard. Persistence was not going to get you there in 2020. So that's the best example I can give everybody because everybody adapted in some way. So I think my ability to adapt in a positive way started as a gymnast. So you're all day long being coached and adapting. Point your toes, straighten your arms, lift your leg, lift your arms higher, twist later, throw your right arm higher so you can land. I mean, whatever it is that you're working towards, working on in gymnastics, you're constantly being told change, adapt to get better. And then later when I was in television, that ability to think on your feet, to be at a shooting or a stabbing or covering a trial and stand there and know, okay, I got all this stuff in my head. I've got to just 30 seconds to tell them a story that is all of the 3 hours worth of coverage that I've done. So that ability to think on your feet. And then I think my time in corporate really helped me take that storytelling to be able, the adapting in a positive way, also adapting with live storytelling. And then my time in corporate really gave me a better understanding of everybody else who didn't have what, wasn't wired like me. Because in television, you don't see your audience. You do the stories on the best of us and the worst of us. Like the in-between people, you don't see much. It's either somebody winning an award or somebody in jail. I mean, you've got one extreme and the other, or someone going through a traumatic experience. So I think my time in corporate really gave me some understanding, empathy, the ability to step into the world of people who are just struggling with everyday stuff. You don't have to be going for the Olympics or be on live TV to be struggling and having to figure out how to move forward. So it's a combination of all those. I don't think I've ever answered that question. That's a really good question.
No. There are so many teachers that are going to be listening to this. And there's teachers that are sitting here day after day in the classroom working with amazing students. And as you might know, students go on roller coasters probably every 10 minutes or so. And I being a middle school teacher right now, I can watch a student have these emotional roller coasters probably 3 or 4 times in a week, sometimes 3 or 4 times in a class period. What advice do you have for educators who are trying to work with 100, 200, 300 students all at once, who some of their roller coasters are small, some of their roller coasters are huge, some of the roller coasters you don't know is happening because they're not part of an IEP or they're not written down in a plan. There's their bigger world. When you're working with younger people, how do you manage all of that? And what advice do you have for teachers out there listening to this show that are trying to figure out the best ways to support the same way? How do you help teachers find their docs in Charleston?
Right. That's a great way to put it. How do they find their docs? Well, I could not fit your whole classroom on my doc. So kudos to all of you who deal with that all day, every day. I will say my mom was a teacher my whole life. So I grew up a teacher's kid, the kid that, went to school early with the moms and stayed late. And she taught for 36 years, elementary, K through 5. And then the last 10 years was elementary science. Anyway, so I don't know your world, but here's what I do know, that you're the main character in your story. You are the hero in your story. And you have got to take care of yourself to be the hero in your story. You've got to make sure that you're in a good place to take care of yourself. Because while you're not the main character in anybody else's story and all those kids' stories, you're not the main character in their story. They are. But you are a character. And are you the good guy or the villain? Sometimes I'll ask CEOs that when I talk with them, like, you're the good guy or the villain with the people that you manage. But in a classroom, you're your own hero. You've got to be your own hero and take care of you. But you also have an opportunity to be a hero to all of these kids who have their own vistas that they're going through. And I think any teacher knows that every kid, like you said, is different and going through large things or small things. And I think most teachers already have a level of empathy to know that you can't be everyone to everybody all the time, but you can listen. I don't know. I don't know if there's one magic bullet for handling up that many people with their own issues at once. But I think one of the most important things you can do is just remind yourself that of those two things. I'm the hero in my story. I've got to take care of me, but I also am a character in this child's story. How am I showing up? How would they describe me? What are the words they would use to describe me? What's the language they would come up with to talk about me if they were going to write it down someplace? And then take feel that in your soul for a moment and see if it's something that you're comfortable with, and be that person. There's a lot of information, and I've heard this phrase a lot. I've been using it a lot lately. Teachers are heroes. You have the hardest job on the flipping planet, by far. That's what you're doing. We meet people. What do you do for a living? I'm a teacher. What do you do? The doing you are doing is being a teacher. That is what you do. But who are you being? So it's more about who you're being than what you are doing when you step in the classroom. Who are you going to be for the students who are around you? And just as hard as it is, try to get yourself in that mindset with all of these roller coasters that you're managing, and remind yourself, stick your core values. Who do you want to be? Be that person every day. That can become your compass. Whatever's happening, be that person. If you can't decide how to act, be the person you want to be in that setting.
And I got to tell you, that's some of the hardest things that you can do, because on one hand, you got to be an instructor. You have to be a buddy. You got to be a friend. You got to be a mentor. You got to be you name it, to every single person all at the same time. It has got to be, it's just an amazing opportunity to have I had 200 students last marking period, and just being everything to everybody. It's pretty awesome. And it's awesome to hear your story in context with those of others that have been through this. A couple years ago, you started a podcast to help others tell their stories. What made you get into podcasting? And tell us a little bit about that journey through creating that show and helping other people tell their stories.
Well, part of what I wanted to do, can I go back to what you said for a minute before we jump into that? I have to say, I think that all those things you listed that you have to be for a student, I'm curious if, being the mentor and the buddy and the this and that, I wonder if you choose the type of person you want to be, and you are the mentor and the buddy, but you're obviously have to be the educator, because you're doing that. You're doing the job as an educator. That's your doing. I wonder if, I'm going to be the buddy and the mentor. Maybe you just pick the two to kind of make your North Star as you make those decisions. I don't know. I've never had to wear that many hats in my life. I can't even imagine. Just an idea. Back to your question. I forgot it. I'm sorry. So back to your question. The reason I started the podcast was partially because I love to talk to people, and I was alone on my own during the pandemic, and I wanted to give other people an outlet to share their stories. And I was working with a lot of authors at the time, helping them take their books that they had written and get them down to a keynote address. So you can't tell your whole book from the stage. Let's come up with what your message is, and let's do that. So I was running a program and helping other authors with that. And I kept meeting all these amazing people. And in the speaker world, I kept meeting all these amazing people. And I realized there are so many stories out there that don't mirror mine, but also tag into that world or tie into that word resilience. And so the name of my podcast is This Seriously Sucks, the right podcast when life goes seriously wrong. And I just talk with people who have been through a really difficult time where they didn't think they could go forward, like something that many people would not get through. And I talk to them about how they did it and how did you get through that? And I have a Paralympian who was a college football player who got paralyzed from the chest down. How'd you get through that? Now he's married. He has 3 kids. He's been to 3 Olympics, and now he's, coaching. He's actually the head coach for the wheelchair rugby team this year. And then I talked to a woman whose son died. Things that I can't. Those are things that I couldn't even imagine getting through. I wanted to be able to lean into the framework that I had given, but to talk to people who'd been through worse things than I had. And so, or things I couldn't imagine. So that's where the podcast came about. It's an opportunity to let people tell their stories, and an opportunity for me to use it for a little research too and share their stories. But everybody on the podcast has to be 10 years past whatever big thing they've gone through. That's really important to me. I want people to talk from their scars, not their wounds. Everything's got to be all healed over. I want you to have fully healed scars and really be on the other side of it so you can tell other people how you did it. Because when you're in the middle of it still, even years after, maybe 2 or 3 years after something goes on, you're still, hit with body blows and things that you're figuring out. So the podcast came about for several reasons. Yeah, for being alone during the pandemic, wanting to connect with people, wanting to tell stories, and just meeting amazing people who were so much more amazing than me and wanting to get their stories out there.
It's almost like this concept that I keep hearing about it. If you're going to fall, you need to fall forward. And that seems to be a theme. You went from gymnastics into college, and then you went into news. And it wasn't like you went from being a gymnast to being a gymnast coach. You made a left turn. And I really admire that, going into something completely new and different for you, and then succeeding, and then making another left turn and succeeding, and then another left turn, and ultimately, of course, podcaster, right? And so what is it about this concept of falling forward? It's not easy, but it's not difficult, but it's just always being able to, I guess, believe in yourself and know that there is that light at the end of the tunnel. And, if I quote Steven Tyler, the light at the end of the tunnel could be you. What is it about falling forward that is so imperative in our lives that we need to just make sure that we're moving in that right direction and never taking that step back?
Yeah. I don't use the phrase falling forward, but I do like that a lot. It's how many times you get down, you fall down, you get back up, and you got to make sure you're falling forward, that thinking behind it. I think of it in my head back to that timeline. And even on my tough days, I'm on this timeline, and I love the magic of all the blank space ahead. If we're in the book of our lives right now, you're the main character in the story of your life. You're on a page right now, everyone. Everybody listening, and you too, Jeff. You're on a page in your book. Everything you've done has brought you up till now. All the pages ahead are blank. So this idea of falling forward is you're in control of those pages more than anybody else. You can put in there whatever you want. You could go off the rails tomorrow, Jeffrey, and go, whoo, triplets, and this, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to get a face tat, dye my hair purple, and hit the road. Hope nobody finds me. You could. It's your life. That's not who you are. I don't suggest you do that. But I mean, you're in control of your life. You're choosing to be the good father and the spouse and the podcaster and helping other people. That's who you choose to be. So this idea of all the blank pages ahead, you can be whatever you want to be. And when it comes to falling forward, when you do fall, one of the things that I love about that is when you are fired, or when you have a medical diagnosis, or when you get a divorce, or when just your world flips upside down, no one's expecting you to do the same old thing. You sort of get a free pass to reinvent yourself. Like, those are the moments you can go, oh, this isn't my rock bottom, but this is a tough spot. This is a chance for me to rethink everything. And so in those moments, so many new thoughts and opportunities that would have never come into your mind had you just kept clicking along doing what you were doing. In those moments, the opportunities will present themselves. And once you start thinking about something and kind of get it in your head of another version of yourself or what the future could look like if you went down that road, it becomes kind of magical, and it's not as hard to let go of the past and do that left turn, as you put it, and go in a new direction. And it's exciting. It's exciting. You have to yourself.
It certainly is. And I'm now in my own kids. They're 10 years old. Not every day is the best day in the world. Sometimes they're now coming back from fourth grade, going into fifth grade. And, sometimes they've had a good day. Sometimes they haven't had a good day. But getting a chance to see it from the parent point of view, and sometimes you see yourself in it, right? Like sometimes you see yourself projected in these three amazing little faces. It's an amazing opportunity to be able to, take the little rock that you have and see how you can mold the world. I want to ask you one important question here. This is a question that I ask everybody on the show. What has been your biggest teachable moment throughout your career?
That's a good question. I don't think I have one top of mind. Give me a sec. I think my most teachable moment was when I went from television to tech, and I knew nothing about software as a service. Big SaaS company, startup, on a rocket ship to go public. Goldman Sachs had just bought out the angel investors, and I just jumped onto a moving train. Really? And they hired me for my skills as a communicator, and for my energy, and for what I brought to the table. And I tried so hard to learn software and learn healthcare, because it was a back-end system for like Blue Cross Blue Shield. And someone looked at me and said, we need you to be good at what you're good at. We don't need you to learn everybody else's job. We just need you to be good at what you're good at. And it was really important for me, and to lean into, I got to keep getting better at this piece that they hired me for. I need to be a better communicator. I need to be better. I need to work on my skills and what I'm really good at, instead of focusing on, I was spending so much time focusing on trying to learn everybody else's skills and get up to speed, that I was not getting better at my superpower. So I think it was the most important thing that someone told me was to, you have skills, focus on what you do well, and make that your superpower. Don't try to be all of the other things because you feel like you have to fit in. And it's strange that is probably the most important lesson that I learned in that space. I was so insecure because I didn't know their world. I was trying so hard to learn it. And I was like, that's not what they hired me for. I mean, what's really interesting about it, though, is since my kids were little, since they were in kindergarten, I would say this as they head out the door in the morning. When they were in middle school, I would say this when they head out the door. And then in high school, and when they're off to college, I said it to them. And now, my daughter works in New York in AI. I've got one in the Air Force, and I've got one in the third year of med school. And I still say the same thing to them. I would always say, hey, go be you. Everybody else is taken. And it's interesting that I think that's what came back to me in that moment. I was probably 40 years old and already successful and trying so hard to be everything to everybody. And I can still see his face. He's like, hey, like he was angry with me. He's like, hey, we need you to be really good at what you do. I'm like, why are you trying to even add to the conversation over there? We didn't hire you for that. Go be really good at what you're good at.
I think that's a good place right there. I don't think I could come up with a question that's going to get a better answer than that. And trust me, that hits home. I feel like I'm sitting on the dock with you in Charleston right now. And if you have, if there's a way for somebody to reach out and get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
I'm on all the social medias. You can find me anywhere, Nina Sossaman-Pogue. On Instagram, I'm on Nina Speaks, and I post some insightful things and some funny things there. I think I'm hilarious. I put some fun stuff up there. I might not be, but I'm me. So yeah, reach out to me through LinkedIn if you want me to speak at an event or be part of my world in a bigger way. But then you can follow me on Instagram or anywhere else, or on ninasossamonpogue.com. You can learn more about all the work that I'm doing.
Well, first of all, Nina, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And please, my microphone is always on for you. Please come back anytime that you want.
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm sending you a copy of my book, Jeffrey. And thank you so much for having me on, and good luck to you, and all the best to everybody else and all of their blank space ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Nina, for coming on the show. And I hope you guys have had a good time listening to this episode. I know this is one that I'm going to go back and listen to in detail one more time. Of course, you can find all the other episodes on teachercast.net/podcast. And if you do, hit that like and subscribe button. Share this with your colleagues. And if you're out there making a difference in the world, I would love to have you featured on the show. You can head on over to teachercast.net/contact and find me today. I would love to bring you on the show and help share your passions with the world. And that wraps up this episode of the Jeff Bradbury Show. On behalf of Nina and everybody here on TeacherCast, my name is Jeff Bradbury, reminding you to keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students.
You've been listening to the TeacherCast Educational Network, hosted by Jeff Bradbury. Please reach out to the show with all of your questions on Twitter @TeacherCast or online at www.teachercast.net. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And please take a moment to write a review in the App Store.